So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Sprint is returning in Halo Infinite. And as it stands now, there is still a lot we don't know about Halo Infinite, so it is possible there could be some playlist without Sprint and without the other abilities, but I doubt it. And to the people out there that don't like Sprint in Halo, and also don't follow Halo too closely and haven't really been keeping up with Halo Infinite, they may hear or see that Sprint is returning in Halo Infinite, and that might be an instant turnoff to them. But it is fair to say that Sprint in Halo Infinite acts much differently than it did in previous iterations. And so in this video today, I want to go through all the Halo games that did feature Sprint, which is Halo Reach, Halo 4, and Halo 5, and I want to discuss how Sprint in those games differed from one game to the next. And I want to do this just to provide more clarity, because Sprint in Halo Infinite doesn't affect gameplay as much as Sprint did in the other Halo games. So the first Halo game to feature Sprint was Halo Reach. In Halo Reach, Sprint was an armor ability. So you had to choose the Sprint ability amongst a bunch of other abilities. So not everybody in a match had Sprint unless everybody chose Sprint. In Halo Reach, the Sprint was pretty fast compared to later iterations, and the maps in Halo Reach were not upscaled to accommodate for Sprint. And they couldn't be, because everybody in the match may not have chosen the Sprint ability, and thus they'd be walking around the map like normal. And in Halo Reach is where the Sprint ability acted most like a get out of jail free. And I believe that was one of the main criticisms surrounding Sprint back when Halo Reach launched, because there were many times where players would cheat death by running away. Something that you could not do in the first 3 Halo games, the first 9 years of Halo. In Halo Reach, there were plenty of times where a player would put themselves in a bad position, whether they did that consciously or not, and they would be able to use the Sprint ability to get out of it and stay alive. Whereas in Halo 1, 2, and 3, they probably would have been dead. So Halo Reach was the first Halo game to incorporate Sprint and several other abilities into the game. But now let's move on to Halo 4. In Halo 4, Sprint still felt quite fast, and I don't have all the numbers in front of me, right? I don't know exactly how much faster Reach's Sprint was than Halo 4's or vice versa, or if they were exactly the same speed. But from the time that I put into the games, I'll say if Halo 4's Sprint felt similar to the speed of Halo Reach's Sprint, but in Halo 4 the scale of the maps were larger, because in Halo 4 everybody had Sprint. It was no longer an ability you had to choose. It was part of the base movement mechanics in Halo 4. Halo 4 still had armor abilities, and you got to choose one of them, but it's not like you were swapping out your Sprint. Everybody had Sprint, and they got to pick an armor ability to go along with it in Halo 4. So because everybody had Sprint in Halo 4, seeing a player sprinting around was more common in Halo 4 than it was in Halo Reach. And like I said, in Halo 4, the Sprint still felt pretty fast. You could run away and stay alive. You could get out of bad situations by sprinting away. A lot of the complaints people had about Sprint in Halo Reach also carried over to Halo 4. But to be honest, I don't really think Sprint was the main complaint people had with Halo 4, because Halo 4 did not hold back at all with giving us lots of things to complain about. Now moving on to Halo 5. As with Halo 4, every player had Sprint in Halo 5. Armor abilities were gone, and Spartan abilities were in. So not only did every player have Sprint, but every player had Sprint, Thrust, Stabilize, Ground Pound, Spartan Charge, and Slide. And I know the focus of this video is Sprint, but the reason I mention the other abilities is because if you combine Sprint with some of these other abilities like Thrust and Slide, you could benefit from that, and it would make Sprint more effective. So with Sprint in Halo 5, the speed seemed to be slower than what it was in Halo Reach and Halo 4. In Halo 5, if you took damage right when you started sprinting, it would knock you out of sprint. Sprint in Halo 5 was infinite, so it would never run out. You could sprint as long as you wanted, and when you stopped sprinting, you didn't need to wait for it to recharge before you could start sprinting again. And also like Halo 4, Halo 5's maps were also larger to accommodate for every player having sprint. And you know, increasing the size of the map because every player has sprint isn't necessarily a great idea. Because here's the thing, 343, they might take a multiplayer map and they might stretch it out. They might increase the length of certain hallways, certain ramps, certain areas to account for players who are sprinting through those spaces. But here's the thing, you are not always sprinting at all times in Halo. I mean, there are times where you don't want to sprint. You're limited when you sprint. You cannot consistently shoot while you're sprinting. You can't throw grenades while you're sprinting and turn around and look behind you while you're sprinting. There's a lot of things you cannot do while you are sprinting. So then those areas that they stretched out, that they made larger to accommodate for players sprinting through them, well then it kind of feels like it's taken a little too long when you just walk through them. And sometimes you want to walk through them so you can do all these different things that you can't do while you're sprinting. So increasing the size of the map to accommodate for players sprinting, I never looked at that as this all-around great decision. Because like I just explained, you do create other problems by doing that. Also, another thing worth mentioning about Halo 5 Sprint is that you could shoot immediately out of sprint. Unlike Halo Reach and Halo 4, where when you stopped sprinting, you had to wait about a second before you could begin shooting again. It's like you had to ready your weapon. If you're sprinting in Halo 5 and you shoot, you will immediately stop sprinting and start shooting. And I never played a ton of Halo 5, but I actually think this might be a change that I'm in favor of. I'm definitely in favor of it in Halo Infinite because that's how it works in Infinite. If you're sprinting and you shoot, you will shoot immediately. There's no delay to start shooting again when you get done sprinting, and you know, that just feels more natural, more Halo. Whereas in Halo 4 and Halo 5, it kind of felt a little awkward when you stopped sprinting and you had to wait a second to ready your weapon and shoot again. And also, with Sprint in Halo 5, when your shields were down, whether they were completely depleted or just a little depleted, when they were down any amount, your shields would not recharge when you were sprinting. And obviously that seems like a change 343 made to take a little bit away from the effectiveness of Sprint in Halo 5. And I'll tell you right now, I absolutely hated that change with a passion. And I also am someone who hates Sprint in Halo. And just to clarify, when I say I hate Sprint in Halo, it might not be that bad in the campaign. It can be fun in custom games, but I'm talking, for the most part, in the PvP, I hate Sprint for Halo. I didn't like it at all, how your shields would not recharge when you were sprinting in Halo 5. Because, for one, if you just tapped Sprint for a millisecond, you just tapped Sprint for a millisecond, the shield recharge time would reset. And I'm showing clips of this right now. You're seeing it right now. That makes absolutely no sense. Because if I'm just tapping Sprint for like literally a millisecond, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not covering much ground at all. I'm barely moving. And I'm being punished for that? Like, what? I didn't even go anywhere. And you're resetting my shield recharge? That made absolutely no sense at all. And also, from Halo 1 to Halo 4, if your shields were down and you didn't take damage for a couple seconds, your shields would recharge. That's the way it was in Halo 1, 2, 3, Reach, and 4. It's always been that way, and it's never been a problem. But now, with Halo 5, you're gonna switch that up. You're gonna change the rules. So now it is possible to not take damage, but your shields won't recharge. They altered a system that was in Halo since Halo CE through Halo 4, and now they're going to change it. They're going to change it so that this ability, sprint, isn't as effective. This ability that people have been expressing dissatisfaction with since Halo Reach. And not just a couple people, many people. I did not like that at all, and I might be going on a little bit of a tangent here about this, but I don't care. I hated that they did that to the shields when you were sprinting in Halo 5. And some of you might argue, oh no, that it was a good thing, because now when players sprinted away, their shields wouldn't recharge. What, you want people to be able to sprint away and get their shields back? No. I don't want sprinting at all. But if you are going to have sprint in the game, don't go changing up what I would consider a major aspect of Halo, the shields. You don't take damage for a couple seconds, and the shields recharge. That's a big part of Halo, and it had been like that from Halo CE to Halo 4. And for the brief time that I did play Halo 5, back right when it launched, I was not used to that at all. Sprinting and the shields not recharging. I couldn't get used to that. I mean, how can I get used to that? For as long as I had been playing Halo before Halo 5, and now you're switching up the shield system on me? God, I'm so glad that's gone. And it is gone with Halo Infinite. In Halo Infinite, your shields can recharge while you are sprinting. So let's just recap Halo 5 real quick. Sprint in Halo 5 was still very effective with helping players traverse the map quickly. Sprint was something you could still use to run away from a battle or run away out of a bad situation and stay alive. But in Halo 5, if you combined sprint with some of the other abilities, you can move around the map faster than ever before. And this is not going to be the video where I take the time and explain all the reasons why I dislike sprint and abilities in Halo. I've done that in previous videos, you could check them out. But now moving on to Halo Infinite. Sprint has returned in Halo Infinite, and like I said at the beginning, some people who don't follow this game too closely, this might be an instant turnoff to them. But here's the thing, as many of you know that are watching the video, with sprint in Halo Infinite, it is much slower than sprint in previous Halo games. I believe sprint in Halo Infinite is only like 8 or 9% faster than the normal walking speed or normal running speed. I don't know what to call it. If I call it walking, people tell me it's running. If I call it running, people are going to think sprinting. But yeah, sprinting in Halo Infinite, it does not increase your speed that much more than moving max speed without sprinting. And this is something that I absolutely love. And the first thing people might think when they hear that, when they hear the sprint really isn't that much faster, you might think, well then why is it even in the game? It's in the game because it does still serve a purpose. Slide is in Halo Infinite, and you have to sprint to slide, so it is still useful. So I kind of think of sprint as charging up your slide ability, and you don't even have to be sprinting for that long at all to get a slide off in Halo Infinite. You could just sprint for less than a second and then get the slide. And in Halo Infinite, it seems like you can slide faster and further than you could with sliding in Halo 5. And I'm just talking about basic sliding, not using any special techniques, which there are different techniques that you can utilize in Halo Infinite to get an even further slide. So even though Halo Infinite only has 3 abilities that are part of the base movement mechanics in that game, which are clamber, sprint, and slide, you can still use the sprint and slide to get around the map pretty fast. Another thing that I like about Halo Infinite in regards to the sprint is sprinting will make you show up on radar. So in Halo Infinite, unlike any of the other Halo games, you do not show up on radar when you are walking around the map as normal. Crouching around the map, jumping around the map, walking around the map, none of that will make you appear on radar. But shooting, sprinting, and sliding will. I'm not entirely sure about clamber. So that is another thing that kind of takes away from the benefit of sprinting, because you show up on radar and players will know where you are if you are in range. And so at the end of the day, even though many people who dislike sprint in Halo still might dislike sprint in Halo Infinite, I don't think sprint in Halo Infinite affects gameplay nearly as much as it did in previous iterations. I've been seeing some people say that 343 has perfected sprint. They finally got it right this time, and I get why people are saying that. But for me, I'd like the game even more without sprint, or at least without it being part of the base movement. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it was a pickup on the map. I'm not looking at sprint in Halo Infinite and thinking, man, they finally did it. This is really good. This has improved Halo having this version of sprint. I don't think so. I think the sprint in Halo Infinite just affects the gameplay the least out of all the Halo games that did have sprint. So that's going to do it for this one. If you're someone that doesn't like sprint in Halo, don't get too discouraged, because it's really not that bad in Halo Infinite compared to the sprint in the other Halo games. Again, I'd still prefer if players didn't have sprint, slide, and clamber as part of their base movement mechanics. But like I've been saying, sprint isn't as bad in Halo Infinite, and Halo Infinite is the Halo game with the least amount of abilities out of all the Halo games that did have abilities. And so I am happy about that. Halo Infinite may not be perfect, it may have a lot of flaws, but I think I'm going to enjoy it a whole hell of a lot more than Halo 4 and Halo 5, and maybe even Reach. It's still too soon to say. Still a lot of the game we haven't seen, and I'm really reserving. I'm reserving my final judgment until the game releases, which I think many are doing. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out, everybody.